Okay, welcome everybody to part 2. This is our YouTube channel, so if you are watching on the YouTubes, please hit subscribe and hit the bell to get notified of future videos just like this one of hope and really just stories that I think need to be told, so that people like us and like you can actually feel like you're not alone, and there are people out there that have gone through the things and have all the same sort of process as you, and there's hope for you to come out on the other side with good things in your bucket. We called this But God, hashtag But God, after a decade of infertility, and so this is part 2. It was cut off at a dynamic part of the story the last time. I found that to be so funny in the sense that God left us on a real cliffhanger there. And so just if you haven't seen part 1, I encourage you to go back and watch part 1 first, if you want, or just keep watching on this and go back later to watch it. But we ended at the part of your story, Christy, where you left the maternity ward at the hospital and dropped to your knees and just cried to the Lord, no, I'm not doing that again. And then you called your OBGYN. And that's where it cut off.
I'm so sorry about that. I was staying at my mother-in-law's house and I thought I had the right wall plug for my computer, but apparently I didn't.
It's just so fun. I mean, this is what makes it really relatable, because we're just real people wanting to share real stories, and you can see that it's clearly just normal people talking about our lives and what we've been through, and just doing our best with the technology.
Yeah, so I guess just to pick up right where we left off. So the maternity ward doors had shut behind us after we had been asked to leave, and the locks just, and it just sent me into this emotional, almost panic attack, like just, I don't know, it was so difficult. And my husband carried me downstairs basically, and the caseworker is just, trying to talk to us. And I am just like, I don't want to talk. Stephen is trying to get her to go. He's just trying to get me to the car. He's thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the point where my wife just loses her mind. And so, as we're walking across the parking lot, I just raised my fist to the Lord. And I was like, I am never trusting you again. I'm never trusting anyone again. Like, I just kept saying that over and over again. You just can't trust anyone. And so we get in the car and I'm sobbing, and I call my OBGYN and I'm like, I need medication. And she kind of knew what was going on. And she was like, what pharmacy can I call it into? And probably one of the smartest things I ever did, because of just where I was in processing things. I was already in just this anger state, and then just to have another trauma on top of that. I am an advocate for, if you need medication in the moment to help you process through all the stuff you're going through, and I believe that's okay. And I'm a nurse and I understand the complications and this and that, and but you could get addicted. No, sometimes you just need a little help. And so in that moment, because I wasn't just going home to process, I was going home to be a mother. I had to be a mother to Shiloh. I had to be the best mother I could be in that moment. And it wasn't like I
was gonna say, you should probably introduce your little baby and Shiloh.
This is
Hi, Shiloh.
Welcome to my home.
Yeah, how old are you now, Shiloh?
I'm 12, turning 13.
She'll be 13 in September.
Amazing. Amazing.
This is Brooklyn. She's 7 months, and I had her down and she woke up just like 5 minutes ago.
That's just how it goes.
It is.
I don't prefer to do stuff in the night because of this whole scenario myself, but I still put myself out there.
When I was looking at the times, I was like, well, if I got them all down, like that would be perfect because, you know, on top of all of this, my husband's in the military and is, you know, stationed somewhere else right now. And so, you know, I just think if I can get all the kids like in bed, then I could do it. But
You're awesome. And this is just real life. And I just so happen to get all my girls down in enough time to do this myself. But I want to clarify, when you're saying you needed medication, you're talking about for your emotional stability, just to help you to level out a little bit so you could do the things you needed to get done and process without having the highs and the lows of those emotions.
Yes. Yeah. So I had already talked to my OBGYN about the whole situation, and she, you know, she's very attuned to what's going on. She had treated me for up to this point, you know, for 7 or 8 years. And she had known about the previous failed adoption. And she was like, well, if you ever need anything, if you ever need any medication or someone to talk to, just let me know. And so we had kind of talked about an antidepressant, you know, previously, like if I ever needed one. So, you know, I put a note into the nurse, and actually my OBGYN called me back and was like, what's going on? And she put me on Wellbutrin, which is an antidepressant. And, you know, it didn't like numb me or anything. I think it just really helped me maintain like an even kill, which was probably for the best, because I had a lot to process. I had anger things to process. I needed to focus on my daughter. I needed to, you know, also start really focusing on my marriage at that point, and some of the wedges that had been, you know, placed. And so there was a lot to process, and then just the processing of what the heck just happened. And there was a lot to it. You know, this birth mother had a lot going on. She had family things that were going on. And then, you know, the baby came early. So I think that just kind of threw in another mix. You know, when your baby's so tiny and needs help, you know, your twins were probably small. And so
I was super protective.
Yeah, it just this mama heart comes out, you know, and this birth mother had been a mom before, you know, so it's not like she was, you know, unaware. So there was a lot in there. And, you know, I can say today, you know, that I harbor no ill feelings for what happened. And the way that they processed and did it in the moment may not have been the kindest way to do it, you know, asking us to leave like that with zero closure and zero reasoning. Like they didn't even send a representative out from the family to talk to us at all. It was just like, we want you to leave. And so we felt like leaving the maternity ward, we felt like, you know, criminals almost, you know, like get out. And so that just put another layer on it, like what the heck just happened, you know? And so, anyways, you know, we swing by the pharmacy, pick up my medication, and I go into the house, and I just go into my bedroom, and I just sob and sob and sob and sob. And, you know, Steven, at this point in our relationship, he's just like, kind of like, I don't even know what to do, but I'm going to give it a little bit of space because I know if I go in there now, it's not going to be good. Well,
let the medication sink in.
Let the medication take effect. So unfortunately, my phone rang, and I looked at the number, and it was my work. And I don't know what on earth made me pick it up at that moment. But I answered it, and they all knew that we were at the hospital because that was the hospital I worked at. So that was a whole nother layer. Like, this wasn't just some hospital that, you know, we went to on an off chance. No, I went to this hospital every day because I worked there. And so they knew we were there. They knew we were there, you know, adopting this baby. And so they all called and were on speakerphone and were like, congratulations.
Whoops.
Yeah. I was like, there's no congratulations. We don't have the baby. I gotta go, you know, and I hung up the phone. I mean, it just was like, what the heck, you know? So that was kind of it. And about a week later, we went to the caseworker's office, and she just really wanted to process some things. I was in a frame of mind to listen, but there was a lot of stuff on my heart that I said, and some of it I probably shouldn't have put on her. But basically just like, did you see this coming and like didn't warn us? Like, of all the people that you've worked with, don't you know that like if you saw something not right, like I'm the person you should tell. I felt really unprotected, I don't know. It was
super
really
exposed.
very exposed, and like this wasn't my first rodeo to have my heart broken. And so, we listened to her. She apologized to us because she said that there were some red flags, but that, she just felt so confident in this birth mother and her plan. And she was, really sorry. And so it was good. We said, our bit, she said her bit. And I feel like we walked out on a mutual, like, well, that didn't work out, but we're praying, kind of a feel. And then about that same time that we had that discussion with our caseworker, a member of the bio family texted me a very long text, basically just saying it was never our intention to hurt you.
Right.
It was never our intention to end it that way. Because of all the extenuating circumstances, this is just what happened. And so we want you to know that we love you, appreciate you. And so the tag end of that text message was, we've named the baby this, and they put our last name as the baby's middle name because they wanted to honor us in the process. Even still to this day, it kind of has a zing to it because it's like, but that's just one more thing you took from me that you didn't have. But
right.
But on the other end of it, I can see where they thought that was like a good thing to do.
Right. I mean, just because you understand and you can reason it doesn't mean that it isn't painful, because there's also still the ownership and the,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you want to look at it from, the merry-go-round perspective of every angle, like, oh, that was really nice. But then when you turn to me, it's like, oh, well, good. You took everything and my last name, so it was just like one more thing to process, like one more thing, to like chalk up on the list of forgiveness. And, here I am constantly trying to keep my heart above bitterness. I'm trying to, not be that girl. But just the layers of mud to wade through was just agonizing. And it was months of soul searching, Bible reading, cry praying,
Yeah.
all the things to process. And I mean, I say months, but honestly, like years later, I was still like just rolling over it in my heart.
Yeah.
It was painful, and it was all of the pain on top of that. So it was just layers and layers and layers of just trauma and pain. And I just had enough, at that point. I was like, I give up, I'm done. So
you're at your breaking point with being able to handle any more of those types of cycles.
Yeah, I just felt like, I've explored every avenue. You would think that I was done, and my husband likes to say that I was, kind of beaten up on myself, but I was like, you know what, we're going to give this infertility treatment stuff one more go. So about a year later.
What I find funny, Christy, is that at the beginning of the story, you had said that you weren't even sure if you wanted kids.
Yeah.
And then as we go through this story, I think, gosh, this is funny to me because a lot of people say stuff like this and then they fight this hard for something they said they weren't sure they wanted, but it's like, what happened that triggered that desire? Or maybe, I don't know, but to actually fight as hard with everything you have in you. You're fighting with everything you have in you to get to that place of having babies.
You know, I think that sometimes when we're young, and I think how we grow up, you know, if you have a tumultuous childhood or upbringing, you know, you kind of might be jaded if you didn't have great relationships with both of your parents. Can you please take her? I'm just gonna go like hold her and bounce her in the other room. You know, if you have like difficult relationships with one parent or another, you know, I think sometimes that jades you a little bit. And also, you know, I babysat, things like that. It was just like, oh my gosh, kids are just so hard.
Yes.
So I think at the beginning of my marriage, I was kind of like, I don't know. You know, with all my physical problems and all the pain I had, like just thinking about having to go through labor and delivery was just like, oh, I really don't want to do that. You know,
yeah, so like I thought maybe too that because that makes total sense to me. And also, like for me, I watched one time, I watched a home video of home births, and I was like, maybe I don't need to do that, you know?
Right.
But then I thought for you also probably just the idea that you had been told for so long with your physical pain and situation of endometriosis that it was likely that you might have problems getting pregnant. You maybe just resolved that you didn't need to have kids, you know? I mean, maybe, I don't know. Is that?
And so I did kind of like settle into that, like, well, if I don't have them, okay, that's fine. But then I think as we progressed, and I would say once we adopted Shiloh and I was like mom and just doing all the things that you do with your kids, I just was like, oh my gosh, I want more of this. Also, like, I just wanted Shiloh to have a sibling. And, you know, I wanted that whole thing. And so I think just becoming a mom was like a huge, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I love her and I want more of this. And I didn't care how it came, like if it was from me or another adoption, it was just like, I just want to love on a kid. Also, like just in my nursing career, I did a lot of pediatrics early on. And then I also worked at a children's home, which is like where foster kids live when they're having issues or if they're having to be moved around or this or that. And it was for 4 to 12-year-olds. And I was the evening nurse, and it was such a great job. But I just loved those kids and mothering them. And like the little 4-year-olds, you know, they would call down and the workers would say, oh, so-and-so wants to know if you'll put them to bed, you know, and I'm like, okay, I'll come put them to bed, you know, and I would sing them a song and pat their back. And, you know, so I think also the Lord was just kind of like stirring motherhood in my heart.
Yes.
You know, on all sides of, you know, of the line. So
yeah,
it was definitely a progression. And then also, I think that, you know, we're just made for communion. We're made for that. And there is, I mean, scientifically, there is something in a woman's body that just will propel her and push her. And I mean, I know women who have gone to the nth degree of, you know, trying to conceive, have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to conceive. I mean, in my career as a nurse, I work in surgery, and I have done the embryo transfers for IVF at a hospital. And I mean, just watching these women roll in, and some of these women, like it was their last embryo, and the stress, and that you could just, it was a physical like tension in the room. And I would just, you know, inside and under my breath, as we were transferring this embryo, I would just pray like, dear Lord Jesus, please let this take for this mama. I know what her heart is. You know, I knew what her heart was going through. And
right.
And I mean, it was just like some of them were sobbing and crying. It was just like so emotional. And so, again, it's isolating, it's painful, it's traumatizing. It's just one of these things, but your body craves it. We crave to be mothers, and not everybody. There are those people who are like, well, not me. And that's fine. But I would say, the majority of women at some point in their life will crave that maternal, they just have a longing for it. And that's
right. It's built in.
It's built in. We're created to give life. And it's a beautiful reflection of a part of God's heart that only we can share with him. And so, it's a driving force.
So good. That's so good. I just feel like this is going to be so just helpful to have the progression of the emotional process of, just the ups and downs. Like so many women, I feel like they have things spoken over them, over their lives. I just talked to my mom about this today. This isn't related to like pregnancy and stuff, but just realizing that from a young age, a lot of times girls are kind of suppressed. It's like, don't be too strong, don't show too much emotion, whatever. It's constant, like, and I'm not saying that boys are not, but I'm a woman, so I don't really know about that as much, but just feeling like, when you are having these struggles in your physical frame, and then you go to the trustworthy doctor and you're a young person, these things have more impact even because you're more vulnerable. The younger you are, you're more trusting and all of that. And as you get older, you learn how to navigate people and things like that, and how to have boundaries and all of that stuff. But a lot of stuff has to be broken down and broken off of us when we become adults, so that we can actually believe that God has good things for us, and that our desires are not, they're not shameful. They're not embarrassing. The struggles that we go through because of something like this that we want, it's built in. And I think there's a lot of shame that comes, like when a woman, I even feel this so strongly right now, I could just start weeping. When a woman feels like her body is not doing what it's made to do, and no one's intention is to bring shame on somebody. I don't believe that people's intentions are to shame people, but I feel like it's just even from the inside, feeling like, gosh, my body is not cooperating. Something's broken, like you said before, what have I done that created this? And, taking responsibility, maybe even where it doesn't belong. Some people maybe have done some things, or they have an ability to change something in their physical frame through doing better eating or whatever, that could promote them actually getting pregnant. But mostly it's like, step back and think about, where did the shame come from? And this stuff is like not, I don't know. I love that you said that it's a built-in design for a woman to bear fruit like this.
Well, and I do that, like what you're saying about how women can be shamed. If you think about how easily it is for the enemy to attach shame to a woman, because like for a man, what they do is not necessarily related to their body, their performance. Or for like boys, you might like, oh, you're a big boy, or be strong. It's not necessarily like linked to their physical frame. But for women, we can be sexualized, we can be, all these things. It's so easy to attach shame because we're so vulnerable, because it is attached to our body. It is attached to the way we look. It is attached to, how we move, what we do, what we say, and for women who are well endowed or voluptuous, it's not their fault. you know, but they have to either dress a certain way to hide it, or, you know, have to be confident enough to be it, but they're still going to get stared at, things like that. I just think that, you know, for women, it's so easy because of just being a woman and all that that entails. It's so easy to have shame attached to you. And then to, on top of that, if your body is not functioning in a way that is producing, you know, life or this or that, I mean, it's just the double dose of shame.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And you're just feeling shame for even wanting it. I mean, I felt shame for wanting to get married. I know that's crazy, but I felt that. I felt like that it was wrong for me to want that. And I'm not going to say other people put that on me. Somehow it came from somewhere, maybe even from internal beliefs that I developed over my childhood. But I feel like this is a very big issue with even childbearing or wanting babies, and not when it's not happening, it becomes inflamed. Like maybe, you know, you shouldn't want that, or it's a wrong desire.
Well, and anyways, then people always look back at you and be like, well, it has to be the woman's fault. Well,
right.
It could be the man, you know, and there's lots of tests. But, you know, and I will say for me, it wasn't even like, oh, I just so badly want to be pregnant. Like that was never a drive for me. For me, it was the baby itself and becoming mine, and us becoming a family, and that whole process. It wasn't even like, oh, I so desperately want to be pregnant and so desperately want to give birth. You know, that just wasn't really part of it at all. So like I didn't really care how it came about. I just really wanted more of that motherhood experience. But in the whole process of, you know, digging through all the mud and the trauma of what had happened, I just became obsessive compulsive about like making it happen. And so, you know, we dove into infertility treatments again, and hardcore. And I even I do not recommend this, but I even got a credit card without telling my husband, just charged all of it, didn't tell him how much money I was spending at the clinic for this test and this test. And, oh, here, let's put you on this vitamin, and, you know, let's do this ultrasound, and racked up some incredible debt doing that, that it took me a while to pay off. But, you know, we did all the procedures, and here I am again, just you know, getting shots, getting ultrasounds, you know, having things, you know, injected into you. And this is not like a fun procedure. This is like, here I am on a bed with my legs in stirrups, you know, getting all this stuff. Just, it's almost like a violation over and over and over and over again, and to no avail, you know. And it's like, then you have to deal with that trauma, you know, because how many of us like to go to the OBGYN for our yearly exam? Nobody is like, woo, me, put me in stirrups, you know,
right.
My body, you know, nobody is saying that. We don't like that. Women of the world, we reject it. You know, it's like nobody
wish we never had to do it.
You wish we never had to do it, but here I was doing it to myself because I was so obsessed with it, and I just became like this crazy person. And and finally my husband was just like, are we done? Like, are you done? I'm just like, yes. And so, you know, we decided, okay, well, that's enough fertility treatments, because really we had reached the max. I mean, we'd done everything but in vitro at that point, and we just didn't have the money for in vitro. And so had we had the money, I probably would have just, you know, ran the credit card. I at least had a brain in my head to not do that.
To not go that far.
Not to do in vitro, but to put that much debt on ourselves, you know, because at that point I knew I was not a good candidate, you know, for in vitro. And plus I had seen all those women, you know, on those beds. I didn't want to be one of them. I didn't want to be one of them. crying because this was my last embryo and having sunk so much money, emotion, and time into it. And so that's why I didn't do in vitro, but I do know people who it worked out for them, and it's awesome. So at that point, Stephen and I at this point have started going to counseling, which I highly recommend in your marriage. If you ever need marriage counseling or just someone to talk to, it was a good move for us. We went a couple of times a month, and we really started digging into a lot of the issues and hurt and things like that. And we're really working on us again, which we hadn't done for a while. So that was good. And then we stopped doing the infertility treatments, during all this time, and doing, life with Shiloh, and she's, let's see, she was 8 at this time, I think, around 8 years old. And so, we're doing the school sports and all the things. So there was a lot going on, during that time frame. And so probably about a year after the last fertility treatment, I don't even know where this came from, but Stephen was like a big proponent of let's do foster to adopt. And I was like, heck no. And what his like kind of message to me was, well, we already know that their parents don't want them. So, and I know that sounds so bad and so callous. And, if you know my husband, you know that he is a sweetheart. And, but it was true. There was kind of that safety net of, well, we're probably not going to have that much trouble with the birth family. It's going to be more just the courts and the process. And I kind of knew that world a little bit from working at the children's home. And so that was kind of the only thing that like got me into it, was I wouldn't have to deal with bio families. And, part of me was like, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law had adopted 3 kids out of the foster care system. And part of me was kind of like, oh, this is like a good thing. Like, we should do this. This is a good thing to do. And so it kind of turned my attention a little bit like from inward to outward. And so we went through all the classes. It was, 16 weeks or maybe it's 8 weeks, and then 8 weeks for the adoption classes. I can't remember, but basically it was once a week, and we had to drive to Warrensburg, which is probably like, what is that, 45 minutes, an hour away. You can bring her over. And so we would drop Shiloh off at my brother-in-law's house in Lee Summit and drive to Warrensburg, do the classes for 3 hours, then drive back, pick up Shiloh, go to bed. It was like a lot. And so we did the classes, and then after that we're like, okay, now what? And they're like, okay, well, they'll call you. Oh, okay. It's just so weird. Do all this class, all this teaching and everything, and then they're just like, oh, we'll call you. Your people will call my people.
It's kind of left hanging.
It's so weird. But sure enough, like literally they'll just call you whenever, and they start calling you and then calling you. And it's just the most random thing. So we had decided we didn't want a child older than Shiloh at the time. And so we decided that we would do, I think we did like 4 and under, and sibling groups of.
No, it was 5 and under.
5 and under.
Sibling groups of.
No, 2. Sibling.
I lost sound. I can't hear you. I can't hear you now. What in the world? Can you hear me?
Did my mic
turn on? There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Now okay. I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So we decided that we would do 5 and under with sibling groups of no more than 2. And do me a favor and go and open the dishwasher and grab a bottle and a nipple off the top rack. And so that's kind of what we said. That was on our profile. But they would call us with like sibling groups of 5, you know, and it
Oh
was
my
like,
goodness.
we don't even have bedrooms for all of these kids. And they're like, well, do you have a separate living room? And we're just like, what? You know, I mean, it was crazy. We kept getting all these weird calls, like 4 kids, and one of them would be 17. And I mean, it was just so nuts. And
So much desperation, I guess.
yeah. And so, no, baby, the water in the kettle is hot. Yeah, it's warm. Sorry.
You're fine.
And so then one night, I don't even know, I think maybe Stephen was at work, or maybe he was
at work. I was getting in bed.
yeah, and we get this call for a baby, one baby. And I was like, whoa, okay. She was 3 months old, and they had her basically all day at the caseworker's office, and they needed to place her like right then. And it was like 8
Right.
o'clock. And I mean, of course, we were just, did you fill it up to the 2 or the 3?
I filled it up to the 4.
Okay, 2 scoops. Sorry.
You're good.
And so
We are baby and child friendly here.
okay. Yeah, so then we said, okay, we'll take her. Absolutely. You know, we kind of had baby stuff, you know, in storage or whatever. And
We were not ready.
so they bring us, they tell you very little also about these children. So they bring this baby to the door, and here comes this caseworker, whatever, and they're just basically saying, you know, we'll check in with you tomorrow. And I was like, okay, when's the last time she's eaten? You know, I was just trying to ask like mom questions.
Right.
I'm not sure. Okay, well, how long have you had her? Since 10 that morning. But they weren't sure when she'd eaten last. And I was just like, okay. And they're like, well, there should be some formula in a bottle in the bag. And so they leave, and here I am with this cute little baby, and I smell her, and she stinks. Oh my gosh, she's so dirty and
We give
smells.
her a bath, and then we have to go to we went to the dollar store and got diapers.
Well, yeah, so I open the bag, and there's no formula, no bottle, there's no diapers, there's like an outfit and a bulb suction thing. And I'm like, okay.
So this is how it works.
This is how it works. Okay, so yeah, we go to Walmart. We spend about $250 getting all the baby things that you need, every last little thing. And we come home, and Shiloh and I are just absolutely giddy over this baby. You know, I text Stephen, I was like, hey, just so you know, there's a baby. So we just started on our little journey to foster her, and it quickly became apparent that the birth mom was definitely not gonna work out. This was not her first child to be in care. Actually, it was her 4th child, and she had lost the other 3. And she just kept disappearing, wouldn't show up for court appointments. It became really like apparent early on that she was going to end up for adoption. And so Stephen and I just approached our caseworker, and we said, we'd love to be an adoption resource for this baby. We've already taken our classes. We love her, and we did. We bonded with Summer so quickly. She was such an easy baby to love. I mean, she was drug addicted. So the first 3 weeks she was with us, there was so much screaming. She was just, I don't know if she was overstimulated by just being held and touched, but there was so much screaming. But once you got past that part, it was actually great.
She was the best little sister.
She was so cute, and just watching her and Shiloh just connect and bond was just so precious. So I went to a court hearing one day, and my caseworker was.
Oh, you went silent again. Can't hear you. Something has gone awry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little bit cut in and out.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
weird.
So you said you went to the court till a court hearing one day.
Yeah, so we were going to a court hearing, and my caseworker was gonna like kind of basically produce us as an adoption resource that we've had this baby now for 5 months, and you know, we'd like to move towards adoption. And so the state attorney was like, well, she gets up, she does all of her little thing, and she was like, and on the phone I have a tribal resource, or I can't remember what they call it, tribal caseworker or something. And I look at my caseworker and she looks at me and I'm like, what are they talking about? And so the birth mother had produced an Indian card for this baby with the Choctaw Nation. And so basically, once that happens by law, they have to contact the tribe, and the tribe basically gets involved and has all the say on what happens to that child.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they get this, the tribal resource worker on the phone, and she is engaged in the whole conversation with the judge and everything. And she basically in that hearing says, that family is not going to be able to be a resource, and that she was going to move to have the baby move to Oklahoma so that they can find an Indian family to foster the baby until something can be done. And in that moment, I was just like, what just happened? Like, are you kidding me? This wild card, someone just pulled this out of their back pocket, you know? And so after the court hearing, my caseworker is just like, I am so sorry about that. I did not know. And so
is this the same caseworker you've had every time, or is it a different person every time?
This was my third caseworker in 5 months. And
this just sounds like so much torture.
Oh, it's just absolute torture. But in the midst of it, you know, just loving this baby and just, you know, kind of solidified like my desire to have more children in such a drastic way. So yeah, oh my goodness. Seriously. Yeah, so basically from that moment on, we were kind of chopped liver to the court system, because the tribe, that particular tribe only adopts out to tribal members, or to I mean, you can be like 1/16 Choctaw and still adopt, you know, with them. They don't want Caucasians adopting their children if it's at all possible. And so the aunt, an aunt that didn't even know the baby existed, ended up popping up and was able to adopt her. So that was amazing. And we got a great relationship with her. And so we ended up keeping the baby for 8.5 months. And then she went to live with her aunt, who then adopted her. So it was amazing. And it was amazing to see that whole process too. Because that aunt had basically sworn off that sister because of all of her drug use and everything. And then it was very redemptive that, you know, she was able to then adopt this baby and, you know, give her the home she deserved. So,
right.
But that was very difficult the day that we had.
It's like on one side, it's good. I mean, there's a lot of good things coming out of this process, but on the side of where you're concerned, there's a lot of pain involved, because the longing and desire and the ripping out of of your reach every time.
Exactly. It's like it's always at fingertip, you know, reach, but I just can't get my hands around it. And, you know, to invest so much love and care and long nights and all the things, you know, into a baby like that, it's just, it was hard. It was hard for all of us. It was hard for Shiloh, and Stephen and I realized at that point, like, oh, I don't know if we can do this again, because, you know, we don't want to break Shiloh's heart. And it was just, there was so many emotions to it. And at the same time that we were having to transfer care over to the aunt, we were also moving into our new house. And so, and then also Stephen was getting deployed. And so it was kind of a crazy time, because once you move into a new house, if you're going to foster, then the caseworkers have to come out. They have to do all kinds of stuff. And so basically we put they put our foster license on hold. And so we were just like, let us get through this deployment, moved into our new house, and then we'll go from there.
Mm.
And so he was gone for about a year. In that whole time frame, I decided to go back to school and finish up my bachelor's and get my master's degree. So I was doing school, moved into this house. Stephen was away. And then when he came back, we all, we were like, yay, let's go to Disney World.
Yeah, let's celebrate.
Celebrate, exactly. I mean, we've been through deployments before, but that's just a long one, and it's never fun,
Yeah, I can't imagine having a year long separation.
Yeah, it's hard, and there's so many components to it. There's the components of all the fun family things that you normally do are on hold. Then there's the component of trying to communicate with someone who's like at 9 hours time difference than you, who has a weird work schedule. And then there's the whole disconnect between our lives and his life. And
right.
It's just so many. And then for me, the long, lonely nights, you'd be surprised, but you really want to get a hug. You want that physical contact with someone. You want to be able to like have a conversation with them. And it's just so different over the, computer. And so there's so many aspects of it. But I would say in our relationship at this point, we've done counseling. We've been working on our relationship really hard over a couple of years. And in doing those foster classes, it really brought up a lot of stuff that we were able to talk about. And we had those hour-long trips back and forth in the car. And we really did spend a lot of that time talking about issues and things and learning to communicate with each other in a better way. And Stephen and I got married super, super young. And so I think over the course of all this hardship and trauma, we had matured so much. And really just had learned to communicate with each other better. And so I would say in our relationship by this point, we're doing really well.
Yeah.
And I would say that's huge for anybody who's going through trauma, especially infertility, because it really does affect the husband in a different way. And sometimes Stephen was even afraid to tell me how he was feeling about different things, because I think he felt like I wouldn't care about his feelings, or it wasn't as important to me as what I was going through. And so I would say for, people who are going through this, or who have, had issues with, just childbearing in general, like working on the relationship and doing counseling, it was just so vital for us. Just being able to bear those hard truths with someone who could mediate it between me and him and help us to understand each other's perspective on loss and just all of it. It was so beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I think that trauma in general, this is a good rule of thumb. Grief and stuff just happens, and I think that also possibly the one side of the relationship might feel like, well, they're going through more than I am, and so I'm going to step back and take care of them because that's my job, and maybe even invalidating their own feelings, but not actually being able to step back because their feelings are still, so strong and so present. They're finding themselves not able to actually be there for their partner like they think they should be. So,
yeah. And I
you know,
think,
I want to encourage people like you're saying to get the help that they need, not to be ashamed, to go forward and take care
right.
of the marriage in
Yeah.
those instances.
Because I think too, just, you know, some people might be dealing with infertility may not look at it as a trauma, but honestly, it truly is a trauma.
It's a repeated trauma as well.
Emotionally, physically, it does something to you emotionally and physically, but it also does something to you spiritually. There's just so much of it that is just agonizing, and the grief process is real. And I think when we just call it what it really is, it's trauma. You know, it's not the way it's supposed to be. And so to treat it any other way, it's just shoving your feelings, you know, it's just
right,
shoving it into a bottle and putting a cork on it. Well, that's not going to work for very long.
It's going to be explosive at some point.
Exactly. And it's going to explode, and it's going to damage some relationship, either your marriage or your relationship with, you know, your existing children or your coworkers, or somebody is going to be hurt by that. And so really investing the time to deal with the grief is,
well, not to mention that you're going to be hurt too.
Yeah.
You know, because you're basically, that's going to hurt you, which then rolls out into everyone around you.
Exactly. And so, but this is the part of the story that is just so crazy and quirky. You know, you can't make this stuff up. I always tell my friends, you know, you guys are brave to be my friend, because it takes a lot to endure the soap opera that is my life. Same, I just would tell my friends, you know, after telling them something, I'd be like, same bat channel tomorrow.
I'll be here again.
I'll be here again.
Same time.
So I've started school, you know, during this time. Steven's away, and I decide to go on this really intense diet and health kick. And I had a friend who has PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it's another one of those issues that can cause infertility and pain and, you know, just a lot. And so she had gone on the keto diet, and she had, sorry, what are you doing? You so silly. She had really great results with it, as far as like her physical feeling, like how she felt, her cycles regulated. She wasn't having a lot of pain. She lost a lot of weight. And then in the end, she ended up getting pregnant. And I was like, well, I don't have PCOS, but I wonder if it would work for, you know, endometriosis. You know, I was not holding out hope that, oh, if I do this diet, I'm going to get pregnant.
Right.
You know, I was more at this point, I'm like, if it can just get the last of my symptoms under control, then, you know, that would be amazing. And so I researched it. I, you know, talked to a lot of people, and then I just kind of dove in, and I was really strict about it. I did it to the T, and I did it for about 9 months of the time that Stephen was gone. And I did lose weight. I lost about 40 pounds, which was crazy. I started working out, and really just felt amazing. Within like the first 3 months, my cycles had regulated. I mean, almost every symptom of endometriosis that I had disappeared. And
wow.
I was for the first time in like 20 something years, I was like, whoa, like I feel normal, and I have normal cycles, and I could put them on the calendar for the first time. And it was just crazy. And I was like,
that must have felt exciting too.
It was exciting. It was like, I can plan things, you know? But I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to get pregnant. And, you know, my husband wasn't even home. So it's not like that was even a thought. And so, so Stephen comes home, and we're all just like resuming the thing. And, you know, he kind of made fun of me at first for doing the diet. He was like, okay, wait, you're eating bacon and eggs, and like, that's healthy, you know?
He's like, delicious.
Well, Well, he's actually the opposite. If he thinks that, yeah, he eats a lot of
That's
grapes.
another story.
And so we go to Disney World, and I'm just not feeling amazing, but I thought it was just because I jumped off the keto diet, just back into regular food. I was eating Disney World food, and I was like, I'm just making myself sick. And so we come back, from Disney World, and it's mid-September. By October, I am just not feeling great. And I can't remember. I went to the doctor, and I was, trying to figure some stuff out, and nobody ever said, "Hey, do you think you're pregnant?"
And why is that?
Right? Well, I think also for physicians, if they've treated you for a long time, and like, say my GI doctor, he's treated me for a long time. He knows that I have infertility issues. To be an insensitive doctor and be like, oh, maybe you're pregnant, he's just not going to say that. He's going to leave that up to the general practitioner. Well, my general practitioner, who's been treating me for a very long time, is probably thinking, I'm going to leave those questions up to the OBGYN. He didn't ask me either. And so I ended up taking a test. It was probably like, I don't know, end of October. Well, no, what is the dates? I'm totally off on my dates. I think it was maybe October when we went to Disney. Yeah, it was, because it was closer to Thanksgiving.
Oh, frozen. Oh man, it's frozen again. Let's see if this just comes back up. This is such a great story. Oh, there you are. You're not frozen anymore.
Sorry.
So you said Thanksgiving about?
Yeah, about Thanksgiving. I was we were about to go home to Arkansas to visit family, and I was just like, I'm gonna, this pharmacist, I asked for nausea pills, and the pharmacist was like, well, are you pregnant? I'm like, no, I'm not pregnant. And she was like, are you sure? Yes, I'm positive I'm not pregnant. This is like,
right, because you've had how many years by this time of trying to get pregnant and not getting pregnant?
It's about 15 years almost.
So I'm just going, like, why would anyone ask you that knows you, right? Why would they ask you?
Yeah, nobody would suspect anything. And I do have some other, issues that could lend themselves to nausea and not feeling great, and, vomiting and stuff. I have a throat issue.
Where that could make sense.
Yeah. And so this pharmacist is like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, look, I know I'm not pregnant. And she was like, well, okay, well, here's what I would recommend for nausea. She was like, but you might just take a test just in case. And I'm just like rolling my eyes like, okay, lady. And
well, thank God for her.
Right. Thank God for the pharmacist who said something. And so I grab the pills for the nausea that she had recommended. And, on the same aisle is pregnancy tests. And so I'm like, okay, I'll grab a pregnancy test and I'll just, prove her wrong. So I go home, I take the pregnancy test, and what do you know? Nothing. There's no lines anywhere. It was a total dud.
I thought you were gonna say it was positive. You tricked me.
I know.
You got me.
I know, but that's just where my life is nuts, because, who buys a pregnancy test, 2 in a box, and the first one is a complete dud. I mean, I pee on the stick and there's no lines. There's not even like a, the test line or whatever.
I've never seen a pregnancy test like that.
Well, me either.
I mean, I've taken a lot.
I have too. And I'm just like, okay, this is retarded. And so it made me feel even more dumb that I was taking a pregnancy test.
Then you had to do it again.
The fact that now I have to do it again because this one's a total dud. And I left it on the back of the toilet for a while. So I know that it was a dud. And so that was a Saturday. So the next day is Sunday. And so Lucy,
She's just so tired.
yes, and she fights sleep like no other baby I've ever seen in my life.
She wants to be in the center of the party. What's going on out there? Yeah. You're such a cutie. I was actually on here trying to my Facebook trying to find your group for that you created for your adoption.
Oh yeah.
Because in that group you posted about the test and asked for, you said you were gonna put the adoption stuff on hold or something. I don't quite remember, but
excited. And I, once again, just in this like, that group was crazy because it was kind of like in that moment of like saying yes to Stephen of one more time, we're going to put ourselves out there one more time, because we had some friends that opened an adoption agency here in town, and they were kind of doing things different, and he just really wanted to give it one more shot.
right.
And I honestly did not think we were going to adopt. I thought it was going to end badly again. But I felt in my heart, I had been through so much process with the Lord. And I felt like, Lord, I'm doing this as an act of saying, I trust you. I'm doing this as an act of faith. And come what may, no matter what, Lord, you are good and sovereign, and I love you. And so that's kind of where my heart was in that adoption.
Go back. Is this adoption group before you took this test then?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is the test.
Yes, this is the test that you're talking about. We had started down the road of adoption again. And we're getting home study ready and all that stuff and doing fundraisers.
Oh no, you have gone dark again. Your microphone is not working.
Church. And so I came back home from church and I went to the bathroom and I'm like, oh yeah. So I go to the bathroom and then I'm looking at the test and I'm like looking at it and I'm like, okay, I need to get the box out because I don't remember how many lines. Like there's a lot of lines here. How many lines are there supposed to be? Here I have been taking tests for like a decade. I know how many lines there's supposed to be.
Right, but it was unbelievable.
But it was completely unbelievable. And so I get the box out and I compare it and I am just like, what? This cannot be, because I'm also remembering that first test was a dud. So this test is probably broken and probably has more lines. That's where all the lines from the other test went, into this one. And so I was like, this is insane. Like this cannot be. And just all of this emotion just came flooding in and I just start crying. And I am just like, Stephen, I'm calling out for Stephen to come in and I'm like, and I'm like showing him the test and he was like, what is this? And I'm like, I'm pregnant, and he's just like, what? Neither of us can believe it. And so it was just so crazy, but also so terrifying because I didn't want to tell anybody because what if it wasn't real? Or, how far along am I? Like, what the heck is going on? I don't even know. And so we don't tell Shiloh, Stephen's like, well, you need to get to a doctor. Like, we need to find out if this is real. And so I go to the doctor, I get an ultrasound, get blood test, and sure enough, like, I am pregnant. I mean, Rachel, I cannot even explain to you, like, the euphoria, but the trepidation, like there was just so much emotion at this point. And so we decide we're not going to tell anyone. I only tell like a couple of people because want people to pray, because I'm just like, I feel like sand sifting through my hands. You know, I'm just not sure about this. The thing I've wanted for so long is now upon me, and I'm terrified. And I was 38. And so then that's in my head, like, oh my gosh, I'm old. What if my, body doesn't know what it's doing? And so, I ended up, I was like, I think 8 weeks pregnant, something in there, or maybe no, it was longer than that. It was like 10 weeks pregnant. Yeah, I think it was like 10 weeks pregnant. It's Thanksgiving. And Stephen and I are like, okay, at Christmas, I'll be past my, first trimester, and we'll tell everybody. And it's going to be like, we'll have them open presents.
Whoa.
We thought about the cool ways we could tell people or whatever. And so we're on cloud nine. We're excited. We're being careful. I'm taking all these vitamins, like all this stuff. And we are just like, I'm singing in the shower, I'm praising the Lord, like all this stuff. So a week before Christmas, like the Monday before, I get up, I go to the bathroom, and there's blood. And I am just like, oh, well, what's that? I'm just not knowing. And I'm a nurse, I know things, but I did not know what's going on. So I call my OBGYN, they call me back. They say, in your first trimester, sometimes a little bit of bleeding is normal. But why don't you just come in? Let's do an ultrasound. Let's do some blood work. We'll just make sure everything's okay. And she just reassured me, and she was great. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I had, I had plans that day, and I went ahead and did some things. I know. And then I went to the OBGYN's office. Yeah, I know. And so, I'm not anticipating anything, because the nurse had just kind of reassured me and made me feel like peace, and I just was praying, and I was just like, okay, like the Lord's brought me this far. It's going to be okay, And so I get in there, and I get up on the ultrasound table, and she starts looking around. And, being a nurse, you just, things, and you know how to read ultrasounds. And as soon as she was scanning, I knew right away. And then they did the image where they do the heat scan, where it's like, red for warm and
right, where they see the blood flow.
Exactly. And everything was blue. There was just like no red, there was no orange. And I just was like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. And tears are just rolling down my face. And the girl's name is Heather, and she knows me, and she knows my story. And she was like, I'm going to go get the doctor real quick. That's never a good sign. You never want them to say, I'm going to go get the doctor real quick. And right. I just am crying. I'm sobbing. I'm bawling. It just happened to be a day that my regular OB was not there. And so this doctor that I've never met, that does not know anything about me, is, trying to comfort me and console me. And I am just like sobbing. And so I call Stephen at the office. I tell him what's going on. And he meets me at home, and we're just devastated. So the problem was, it was a week before Christmas. The baby had probably been, probably had stopped growing the week before. So I technically could have, started miscarrying at any point in time. And so my doctor called me the next day when she found out. And she basically told me, you can go and let
You're mute. You're not coming through. Your microphone isn't working. Can't hear you. Oh, there we go.
You know, she was a little worried that I would start the process out of town. And then, you know, if I needed help, that I would have to go to, you know, a hospital and all this other stuff. And so here I was. I've been waiting for, you know, yeah. I've been waiting for 15 years, you know, to be in this position. And instead of telling people at Christmas that, you know, we were going to have a baby, I'm now trying to decide, do I want to have a D&C? Do I want to take a pill? Or do I want to just let my body decide what it's going to do? I mean, I was in agony. It was the worst. All the failed adoptions, all the heart-wrenching things that we had been through culminated in this moment of me trying to decide how to dispose of the very thing that I had cried out for a decade. It was, there's no words that I can use to describe the dilemma that I was in. And I sobbed and wept and cried until there was no tears left. And I called my friends and I was like, I need help. I don't know what to do. And so over one friend came and she brought me, you know, food and chocolate and we, I know, baby. And we sat on my bed and we deliberated the pros and cons of all the options, you know. So I ended up having a D&C. That was Monday. I went into surgery on Wednesday. And we drove home on Thursday and acted like nothing had happened. Because what do you tell people? What do you say?
I don't see how you could do it. I would be like, I can't come. Yeah, just not feeling it.
I know.
Ugh.
I know. And probably that would have been a great option. But, you know, here's my, you know, 9-year-old daughter who is
right.
Who's oblivious to what's going on, who wants to go home to her grandparents and see her cousins and have Christmas. And I don't know if it was just a way to cope with it. I have no idea why we made that decision, but we told nobody. And, you know, I'm still, you know, bleeding from the process and everything. And honestly, I can't even remember that whole Christmas. I couldn't tell you what anybody got for a present or anything like that, because I was just kind of like in my own head, you know, just trying to hold it together. And crazy as it sounds, on the way back, Stephen had to leave early because he had to come back to KC and work. And so I was driving back with me and Shiloh, and my car's engine blew up on the road. And Shiloh.
Gosh, you know what? You have cut out again. Your sound is not on your microphone.
My goodness.
There we go.
Oh
right gosh. At crucial moments every time too. I'm like, what is she saying?
Dun, dun, dun.
So your car blew up on the way home, the engine did.
So my radiator blew up. We're stranded in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. Here I am recovering from having a D&C and, you know, miscarriage. I've got my 9-year-old daughter, and just by the grace of God, he sent it was at night too. And so I felt very vulnerable because, you know, anybody could have pulled up and done whatever, I guess. But the Lord sent this really kindly, like, farmer guy, and he tried to help me, and he knew of a tow service. The tow service guy was like super kind, and him and his wife had just had their first baby. And also, you know, my husband was in the military, like he didn't charge me for the tow. And I mean, he was like, well, I know of a hotel, you know, in the next town over. So he called I don't know what it was, Motel 8 or whatever. And they went and got me food. And so me and Shiloh had food when we got there.
Wow.
I mean, the Lord totally took care of us. I mean, it could have been so much worse. You know, it was a terrible thing. And to me, it was just salt on a wound. But so fast forward, that was December 25th, obviously 26th. So end of January, I go back in for my final kind of checkup or whatever for the DNC to my OB. And we're talking and I'm like, I just don't feel that great. Like, when am I going to get my period back? Like, you know, how does this work? And she was
So
like,
well, was that like 6 weeks after, or how long does it take to do the well check after you get one of those?
Yeah, so I had a well check the week of New Year's, and then so this one was like 2 weeks after that.
Okay.
And yeah, and so and it was mostly because I just wasn't feeling great. And so I came in and she was like, well, let's just draw your blood. Let's make sure, you know, everything's looking good. So they do a blood level. I go home and she calls me the next day and she was like, hey, I'm going to need you to come in. And we're going to need to do an ultrasound and just another blood level. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go in the next day and they take me in, draw my blood, and then they put me in a room. And I'm like, am I seeing the doctor today? And they're like, yeah, she just wants to chat with you. And I'm like, okay. So my doctor comes in and she goes, so I'm going to do an ultrasound on you because I think you're pregnant again. I mean, she just spills it like that. I'm like, what? She was like, your levels are high. She was like, you're like at 18,000. She was like, you should be at 0. She was like, I just want to make sure that there's nothing left in there. She was like, but I think you're pregnant again. And I was like, how is that possible? I haven't even had a period. And she goes, I don't know. She was like, I don't know how you were pregnant again. She was like, I don't know how you got pregnant the first time. And I was just like,
right.
What? You know, and I will preface this by saying, after the first miscarriage, she had done some blood work on me for clotting factors and some other things. And she had put me on a high dose of vitamin D, given me a B12 injection, and then also put me on an aspirin. And so I stayed on the vitamin D, I stayed on the aspirin, and I believe you gave me some Young Living progesterone.
I did, girl, because I was like, I'm going to be helping this person get to where God wants them to get.
Yeah, and so I was doing that as well, plus taking just, you know, prenatal vitamins and stuff. So anyway, she sends me into the ultrasound room and I am just like reeling. My mind is like, what is going on? So here I am getting another ultrasound and there is another baby. Like, I am pregnant. I mean, literally just after having a DNC, I'm pregnant again. And Heather looks at me and I look at her and I'm like, I don't understand how this happened. You know, and I laugh because, you know, I had made fun of people for saying they didn't know how they got pregnant. Like,
it's like, well, there's only like certain ways you can do this. So
I know. I'm like, I just had to laugh at myself because all of a sudden I am that person that I made fun of. Like, I don't know how I got pregnant again. And so I'm only like 4 weeks or something. I mean, I'm like barely pregnant. And so my OBGYN is like, let's just take this slow. She was like, I don't want you to get your hopes too high. She was like, you just had a DNC, your body is recovering. She was like, let's just, you know, kind of just keep ourselves steady. And I was like, okay, like my OBGYN is just, she's amazing. She just is so on it. And she was like, I'm going to keep tabs on you. I'd like to do another ultrasound in 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay. And so I keep those appointments. I do the blood work. I do the ultrasound. Everything's going fine. At 10 weeks, I start bleeding. And I go in and same thing. The baby's gone, and I'm now put into the position of, what do I want to do? Do I want to let my body go? Do I want to take the pill, or do I want to do a DNC? I am just like, I can't even. I mean, even now I struggle with the words to find where my heart was, because, you know, I had reached my breaking point so many times. And yet I was able, through the grace of God, to rise up and say, it is well with my soul. I found that place again with God, where it was like, I love you and you love me. And I know that your plans for me are good and you are faithful. And no matter what, you're still God. And I trust you and I believe you. And then here we are in this position, and I'm just sitting there kind of in my car after the whole conversation. I'm just sitting here going, God, I can't anymore. I can't do this anymore. I cannot go up and down, up and down, up and down again. I'm scared to trust you. I'm scared to trust anyone. I feel like every time I try to do something, this happens. Everything goes wrong. What is going on in my life, God? Please stop it. You know, I'm begging him to stop it. I'm begging. And so at that time, I chose the pill. I didn't want to have another surgery, so I chose the pill to start the process. And I went to the pharmacy, got the pills. 2 days later, I'm in Aldi's shopping, and I feel like crap. But we need groceries. You know, I still have a family. I'm still a mom. I still have to do all the things. And some lady comes and taps me on my shoulder, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yes." Why? And she goes, "Well, you're bleeding." And I was like, "What?" And I look back, and there are drops of blood all on the floor. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it started." You know, and here I am at the grocery store. And she was like, "Honey, I think you should go home." And I was like, "I think so." So, I mean,
so sweet, but it's like,
I know, it's just nuts.
so awkward.
It's so awkward. So I leave my cart. I go out. She goes and tells the manager, you know, clean up on aisle 2. And so
that was kind.
Right? By the time I get home, my seat in my car is just soaking. I'm bleeding and bleeding. And so I get into the house, I change myself, I put a towel on the bed, and I am just like exhausted. I don't feel good. I go to bed. I wake up that night in just a pool of blood. And I'm like, something is not right. Something's not right. It's bright red. I'm not passing clots. I mean, something is not right. So I called the doctor on call. You know, it almost is like they're not convinced that I'm really having that much of a problem. And so they're like, "We'll go into the office in the morning and they'll do an ultrasound." I'm like, okay. So I am so weak and tired by the time I get to the office in the morning. And they do an ultrasound, and I haven't passed anything. I'm just bleeding. I am like hemorrhaging at this point. And so they're like, "You need to go right now and have an emergency DNC." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you're kidding me." You know, and
this
so
is just too much.
Right? I mean, I am numb, emotionally numb at this point. So my OBGYN, she was like, "I'll meet you over there." I call Steven. I get someone to take care of Shiloh. Like, I go to the hospital. I have this, you know, emergency DNC. I have lost a lot of blood. My hemoglobin is down. I mean, it's not great. And so My doctor, at this point, she's just like, I'm not sure what's going on with your body, but you're going to need to take a break. I'm like, okay. You know, I mean, like, what do you say?
Right.
And, you know, none of us know what's going on with me. And, but here I am. I've now had 2 pregnancies that have ended in 2 DNCs in less than 4 months. And, you know, this time I lost a lot of blood. And so she was like, I want you to rest for the next couple of months. And she was like, you guys need to abstain or use protection or whatever. And let's just get you know, back to healthy. So that's what we did. And process a lot. I got a lot of prayer. I ate a lot of chocolate.
Amen.
And I ran my little heart out on the treadmill. You know, I mean, I did all the things. I increased my exercise. I talked to my girlfriends. I prayed and cried and, you know, and found grace in the word, but also I had a lot of questions and a lot of soul searching with no good answers. You know, I was just in this moment of, can I keep going this way? Because what if it happens again and again and again? You know, and by this point, I'm almost 40 and I'm thinking in my head, well, the clocks ran out. You know, there's no more sand in the hourglass. Like, so now we're just tempting fate, you know, and then you have to go, well, you know, and maybe you don't have to, but I went there because I'm a nurse and this is just how I think. Like, well, if I get pregnant again and it ends up being special needs, like, am I there? You know, it was just all the things. And it's like, Lord, are you calling me to be a special needs parent? You know, and there's grace for that. And I just needed to prepare myself for it. You know, it was just like, this is such a turn in the road that I did not expect, you know? So the 2 months of healing up and abstaining and everything came to an end. And me and Stephen were just kind of left with this, like, what do we do? Do we try again? If we do, what do we do? If it doesn't work out, you know, how many times will we try before we just stop? Is this madness? You know, am I traumatizing myself just over and over again for no reason? And so we just kind of came to the, like, let's just try one more time. And then we're going to make a decision. And I was like, okay, God, please give me grace for one more time. Hold my heart because you are the only one who can hold it. You know, that's where I was. That's the prayers I was praying. Like, I am putting myself out there for you, God. You have to catch me. And I, you know, we tried, and in my head, I just was preparing myself for, I'm just going to go ahead and have a DNC and not try the pill again. You know, that's where I was.
Right.
I wasn't thinking, oh, this is going to be the time. You know, I didn't have that hopeful, like, oh, I just know this is going to work. I already was working out, like, okay, I'm going to need childcare. I'm going to need to recover, you know, that kind of thing. And so, you know, we try. The pregnancy test is faint, but there's a line. And so my OB said as soon as I knew I was pregnant to come in. So I came in, I had lab work, and my next 6 weeks just became every week I was getting lab work and an ultrasound, lab work, ultrasound, lab work, ultrasound. They put me on progesterone. They put me on, I was still taking aspirin, still taking the vitamin D. They put me on progesterone and I don't remember the name of it, but it's basically like this really, really, really intense vitamin for geriatric pregnant women, which is just another way to say you're old.
Right.
And so for the next 6 weeks, every week, I went and had my labs drawn, went and had these ultrasounds, and I'm watching this baby grow and grow, but all the while in my head thinking, oh, is it going to be dead today? Oh, no. Oh, it's still alive. Okay. And then the next one, is it going to be dead today? Oh no. So this is this emotional, like up and down. And I would get in my car and I would just be staring at these ultrasound pictures and I would just cry. Or sometimes I wouldn't cry. I was just numb. Or sometimes I would just put them in my purse and go back to work. It was just like, I wasn't holding on to it like it was this thing. I was praying for the baby. I was praying for myself, but I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop, And so we get to 13 weeks. This is like the big one. And I go in, I have my labs drawn, and they asked me if I wanted to like do the labs for the gender and all this stuff. And I was like, does my insurance pay for it? Sure. I'm like, I don't want to pay out of pocket.
You're somewhat detached at this point still.
I am. And I know that sounds maybe callous, or maybe it sounds like, seriously, you've waited all this time. But
I just feel like after all of this process, I feel like it doesn't sound callous whatsoever. It sounds like I can't get attached because I'm going to get ripped apart again.
Yes, that's exactly where I was. And it was my own method of trying to guard my heart and prepare myself for the worst without having a complete emotional breakdown, because I felt like I was on the precipice of losing my mind. I felt like I was about to lose myself in all of this. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay Shiloh's mom. I wanted to be myself. I wanted to finish school. I wanted to do all the things and not fall apart and be that person. I already was
Right.
that parent woman. I was already that person who all the failed adoptions. I just didn't want to be that person who, she had a few miscarriages and she lost her mind. So we passed 13 weeks, 14 weeks, 15 weeks. And then one day I was in there and I'm going weekly. I'm having my labs drawn. They're watching me like a hawk. And I went in and my OBGYN was like, well, you made it. And I'm like, what? She was like, well, you're in your second trimester. She was like, you're doing great. She's like, you're doing amazing. Oh, like, am I done? And she was like, yeah, you're done. You don't have to come in every week now. And I'm like, so what do I do? She's like, go enjoy your pregnancy. And I was like, so I'm pregnant. And I said it just like that. I was like, so I'm pregnant. And she was like, yes, you're having a baby. She was like, as long as everything keeps going well. And, because I'd had the genetic testing, I was waiting for that to come back and tell me that this baby had like trisomy 13 and was going to die, when it was born.
Right.
That didn't happen. And, everything, all the tests kept coming back fine, but I just kept waiting for the next one to be, the one that told me that it wasn't going to happen. And so I went home and I remember telling Steven, I was like, so I'm pregnant. And he was like, yeah.
He's like, haven't you been pregnant for like 14 weeks?
Right. He's just like thinking you have lost it. And I'm like, no, like we're pregnant. Like we're really going to have a baby. And he was like, well, I hope so. And then it just dawned on me. He doesn't believe it either. Like neither one of us believed that it was going to happen.
Right.
We were still waiting for that other shoe to drop. And so, fast forward, the pregnancy is a pregnancy, you have your ups, your downs. And, I was sick a lot. I threw up a lot the whole time. And then it comes time for, delivery, or it's like 38 weeks. And I get this horrendous bronchitis. I am sick as a dog. I end up having to be on antibiotics. They end up having to give me breathing treatments because I have asthma. And I am just coughing. I actually go upstairs to sleep in a different bedroom because poor Steven, I'm keeping him awake. I'm just hacking. And I end up, I start leaking amniotic fluid, and I go into labor or whatever. And, it was labor. It was hard. It was awful. it was, 22 hours of agony.
It was wonderful terribleness.
It was sort of wonderful and terribleness all together. Anybody who says that birth is beautiful is obviously the one working the birth and not having the birth. So yeah, Wesley was born. After about 22 hours of labor, he was stuck and they had to do a lot of maneuvering, but 8 pounds, 14 ounces. And I will say that the people in the delivery room probably thought that I had lost my mind, because when they handed me Wesley, all of the decade of emotions just swelled in me. And all of a sudden it was like I had won the Olympics or whatever. And I just started, like, how in the Bible, like Hannah just started declaring this song and she just started saying this. And I had wondered, like, was this just like her singing in the meadow, like Sound of Music kind of thing? Or no, like she was probably just given birth and started doing what I did, which was, I just started thanking God. And I was like, this is my baby and nobody's going to take away my baby. And I'm sitting here and I'm rocking Wesley like this. And I'm just like, and this is my baby and no one will ever take him from me, and I'm just like declaring the Lord and all this other stuff. Well, so
I love it.
So Steven, my poor husband, he is just like, he knows, obviously, he's lived it. But he's looking at all the people in the room thinking, they probably think my wife has lost her mind. And if anybody's going to take the baby, they're going to take it to child services. Right. It's like, oh my gosh.
He's like, shh.
Exactly. He's like, shh, honey. So he decides to then go to the nurse and the doctor who is standing there kind of looking on, because they've already sutured me up at this point. And he tells them, so we've been trying to have a baby for 15 years. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because here I'm like, this is my baby and nobody's going to take my baby. So,
they're like, nobody's trying to take your baby, lady. So,
it was crazy. So yeah, it was just from that moment on was just this love fest for, months on end of just loving on him. And, Shiloh got to come that afternoon straight from school. And unfortunately, Wesley was like really jaundiced. And so they had him in like the little glowworm suit, thing.
uh-huh.
So when she gets there, here he is like glowing and this tube coming out of this blanket. She's like, what's wrong with him? Okay, he's fine. So, she's snuggling him and she's bawling because she's like, I've always wanted a brother. And there's just so many times where we all just would be snuggling and break down and just cry. And it was just a love fest. That's how I can describe it. It was just
so beautiful.
Yeah. And so then, almost 2 years to the day, I'm not feeling great. I'm in the middle of college algebra, English 102 and art survey all at the same time. The pandemic has hit. I'm now homeschooling my child while trying to take college courses, while, vomiting. And I'm like, ugh, what is wrong with me? And so I all of a sudden go, oh my gosh. So, we're all in the pandemic. So I have to order a pregnancy in my Walmart pickup and wait for it to get ready. So I get that and it's April 13th. And so I take my pregnancy test that night and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, oh my gosh. So the next day I turned 40.
That's awesome.
And I wait a few weeks to tell Steven just to kind of make sure. And then I call my OBGYN and start the whole process of, every other week. 1 week it was labs. The next week it's an ultrasound. The next week it's labs. And yeah. And
And here she is.
Here's Brooklyn. Yeah.
This is the most amazing story. I mean, it's so much more than I expected, actually, because, I actually watched your process for a long time. I think I was around watching longer than even probably you realized, just because I remember a lot of those points that you talked about.
Yeah.
But I wasn't involved, right? It's like from a distance you notice or you hear or whatever in a community like ours,
right?
Where there's a lot of interaction and communication that is distant. And so feeling like I did come into the story at the adoption process where you were doing fundraising. I came in a more, present place at that point. And that's like, I just feel like I love how God does this kind of stuff. He weaves in people into your story for purpose, and for plan, and I just feel super appreciative that you were willing to come on and share all of the ups and downs, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're frozen again, so just in case you're saying something to me and I'm not responding, but oh, there you are.
Here I am.
I don't know if can you hear me when that happens?
Yeah, I was hearing you.
Okay, good. Because I'm like, she's frozen. I don't know if she can hear me, but I know that this is going to really speak to somebody out there that's probably been through hell and back multiple times themselves, and hopefully give some hope or help them make choices that are difficult that they're having to make right now. So,
yeah.
Anyways, did you have something else to say?
I was just going to say for a lot of women who have reached out to me, there's a lot of people that have heard my story or only heard pieces of it. Maybe people who have been praying for me for a long time, or just can identify with certain aspects of it. I feel like, for those women who are still struggling in that place of infertility and the agony that, your body is almost warring against you in this, and your emotions, and how to stay in a place of, openness before the Lord while trying to deal with a very heart-wrenching plea in your heart. That's a difficult place, but I will say that it was one of those places where I feel like now looking back after, having gone, 15 years in that place and doing things the wrong way and doing things, what I consider the right way. There is a communion with God in the midst of suffering that is unlike any other. And I think only people who have suffered can truly, truly grasp that, because, there's a place where when Jesus was on the cross and taking upon himself all the burdens and all the sin, and, it says that he was marred more than any other man. And he not only took all the physical punishment, but then when, God turned away, and there's just so much in that place of suffering that I feel like Jesus sees you in that place, and you see him in such a different way. And if you're willing to embrace the suffering and the communion with it, I'm not saying to embrace the barrenness, and I'm not saying to embrace the infertility as like, oh, this is my lot in life. but embrace the communion of Jesus in the midst of that sorrow. He's there as the comforter, and he's there as one who has suffered. And it's just such a deep place of communion. And there's so many scriptures that came alive to me in that time that I don't know that would have spoke to me any other way.
Yeah.
So I will say that there is a journey in the midst of the sorrow to be had if one asks for the grace and has the grace to do it. But still also remaining in that place of faith for healing and for fullness, but also allowing yourself to be vulnerable to reach out to other people. I wanted to read this real quick. My friend is, I have a friend who's kind of going through some similar situations, and she just had such beautiful words about embracing messy community. And you can choose isolation. You can choose to do it on your own. But what one thing she said, I was tempted to just keep it to myself and fight through. But instead, I decided to let my people in, and I shared my heart, and they carried me all day. I chose messy community and vulnerability over perfect isolation. I chose connection over protection, and it's so worth it. And when she sent this to me,
so good.
I mean, she's in the midst of the struggle, and she sent that to me, and I was like, this is beautiful. I said, it took me a decade to get to that spot, and you're already there. Like, what? I mean, but that is so true, that messy community and that vulnerability of letting people in to your story, letting people into your fight, instead of just going into that place of isolation and like, this is just my own fight and I have to do it myself. Like, there is something to be had in the community aspect of that, in that place of infertility and in that place of longing and hoping and having faith. And so I would say, anybody who's in that place, it is hard to be vulnerable, but there is a strength in community.
Yes. I love that you're saying that. And that thing that you read from your friend is like such a eloquently spoken or written thing. And I think that's what I was thinking about your story as well, is that it isn't about coming with faith that looks perfect. It's about showing up again and staying connected, even when it hurts so much that you want to just lay down and die.
Yeah. And that's where you came into my story, is because that adoption, where I started that page for Beauty for Ashes, I told my story, and it was heart-wrenching because it was like I was reliving so much of it, but I was once again signing up. I was once again saying, here I am, whatever it looks like, here I am.
Yeah, that messiness is where I feel like the expectation we have on ourselves and the expectation we have outwardly because of what we have on ourselves is an expectation of perfection. Yeah. A lot of times it's like we have a picture of what it should look like if we're walking with God and we're trusting him, and it is faith-led. But I would want to just kind of let's shift our thinking to go, faith means you show up again, that you take another step, that you even just spew out what's inside to the Lord because he's trustworthy. And that's an act of faith, actually, that that God can see all of your ugliness and he still loves you and he's still going to help you. He's still going to stay present with you. And I do want to say that it is, the messy community side of things. There were certain people probably that you couldn't say those things to, right? It's like you're in a, so I do want to say that you do need to be careful who you're processing with, but to actually absolutely find those people in your life that are trustworthy and that will love you in the midst of it. I saw that through your story as you told us over the last the part 1 and part 2, that you had really good friends that let you be where you were at and supported you. And I mean, I think the element of chocolate is so funny. However, the funny part of that is that it's really just an indicator of friends that are not trying to force you to work through anything, but just comforting, bringing comfort, staying present, you know, being available, that kind of thing. So I think your story also just not even about infertility and barrenness only, but about loss, so much loss. And so can really speak to that area of, you know, I don't know, I'm feeling like people having lost a child. There's just so much of that. I mean, also with the miscarriage, you know, that stuff miscarriages that early on are not really talked about as a real loss, but it really is a huge loss.
Oh, absolutely. Because you're not only losing the child, you're losing the hopes of all that it could have been.
Right.
So, you know, and especially if it's a loss like where mine, where had waited for so long,
right.
it truly is the hope of all that could have been and all the dreams and everything. And so, you know, if we trivialize our friends' losses in an early pregnancy, we're trivializing their heart, you know. And I would say if you're a friend of someone who is having a loss, or a friend of someone who's struggling with infertility, you know, it's hard for them to show up. And, you know, being an ear to listen without a lot of advice is so valuable, you know, because they do feel alone and isolated, because there's all those voices in their head, and there's the voices that tell them that they're doing things wrong or this or that, you know. And you do feel very judged in a way that I think people don't understand. You feel very much like you've been put on a shelf and you're categorized as this. And, oh, let's don't tell her about so-and-so having a baby because we don't want to hurt her feelings. Or,
right.
you know, I had a friend at one point and she was pregnant with her 4th baby and she was afraid to tell me. And so by the time she had told me, I'd already heard about it by someone else. And
which is more painful, kind of.
And I was hurt by that. And she apologized and she was like, I'm so sorry. I just didn't want to be like, oh, I'm pregnant again. And, you know, but by not telling me, I was put on a shelf and I was labeled as, you know, that person. And so that's hard. You know, that's hard for someone who's already dealing with so much to be then dealing with, you know, tell us all the things and then let us respond, because more than anything, we want to rejoice with you. We want to be happy for you. We'll deal with our own emotions, but, you know, it's like, it's just to be a friend to someone who's dealing with something like that. I mean, you have to be courageous in your own self, because it's hard to be friends with someone who's going through so much trauma and stuff. It really is, because you just don't know what to do. But I'm telling you, my friends would, you know, come and snuggle, you know, in my bed with me after my surgeries, you know, after
just be yourself, right? I mean, it's really like, stop questioning it and just do it. And then whatever happens, you know, allow it.
Yeah.
It's like, show up if you feel that you should show up. You know, when you have something exciting in your life happening, share it and don't take responsibility for someone else's
exactly,
you know, process.
Let them deal with their process, but, you know, don't exclude them. And then, you know,
because basically either way, it could be wrong either way.
You know, and then when you show up and you don't know what to say, just be there. And, you know, it's organic and it'll play out. And just having someone there, even like my one friend, she just snuggled up in bed next to me. And it was just like, So we didn't say anything. We just ate our brownies and snuggled, and and every once in a while, she would just text me like, how you hanging in there? How's your heart today? What can I do for you? Stuff like that. It was powerful. It brought us so much closer as friends. And,
That's so good, Christy. I really appreciate your heart to share those things as well and help people to be educated on how to deal with trauma and be a friend in the midst of it and all of that. So we are at 2 hours, I think.
I know.
It's amazing. And it's late, so we're going to get off here, but we are so glad that you came and joined us in this conversation. And thank you, Christy, for sharing your life with us on YouTube. Again, I'm going to remind you, if you're having a good time watching these hopeful videos, you think you can send it to someone that it might help, do that. Press subscribe, hit the bell if you want to be notified of any further videos that are going to be coming up in the near future. I do have one coming up real soon that I'm going to be posting about in the next few days. So, okay, well, have a good night, Chrissy. Your baby fell asleep in your arms, so I'm so glad about that.
Thank you
for you.
letting me on.
Yeah, we will see you later.